Hello and welcome. I'm John Buffalo Mailer, here with Martin Tuchman, my friend, boss, mentor, and we're here today to get some insight into the problem of inflation and to learn more about an alternative approach to curbing it. Meet Martin Tuchman. For 40 years, he ran one of the largest companies in the transportation industry, Interpool, and in the process, built a hefty fortune by being able to adopt tactics, ideas, and procedures with uncanny prescience. His ideas for the design and marketing of interchangeable parts for the shipping industry shaped the international transportation of goods. Now meet Martin Tuchman, entrepreneur, head of the Tuchman Foundation, which oversees the Parkinson's Alliance.
Marty realized, being an incredible businessman, there was a tremendous amount of science, but not enough money to fund it. And he said, so I want to start a foundation, and I want to start it like we run a business.
Tuchman helps shape and continues to shape how research into Parkinson's disease is conducted.
You want to talk about someone with time, talent, and treasure that they give, that's Marty.
Benefactor and trustee for the Trenton Area Soup Kitchen.
Just recently we started a new partnership with the Tuchman Foundation, the Muslim Center of Greater Princeton, to deliver meals during the winter. That's the type of thing we got to get a van and get meals out to people. That's the type of thing that Marty does.
He was involved with the security of our ports after 9/11. He advised our government and others on ways to protect our ports and make sure that the items coming into our country were safe and did not have explosives.
Wired from day one to believe in philanthropy and the greater good, Martin Tuchman understands the value of money to a good cause. He has used his combination of engineering and business expertise to create solutions for the problems we face today. Thank you for taking the time, Mr. Tuchman. I guess my first question would be, what are the reasons we are experiencing this runaway inflation at the moment?
Inflation is a tricky business. If it was easy, somebody would push a button and it would go away, or it would get moderated. Inflation is caused by a lot of things. One of them, as a matter of fact, being rising interest rates. So it's counterproductive to think that you could raise interest rates and make inflation go away. As a matter of fact, if you raise interest rates, somebody who's borrowing money to fund an apartment house has to raise the rents. So you are in fact causing inflation by raising those rates. What you really have to do is try to see what are the causes of inflation, the supply and demand dynamics. When the pandemic came, it interrupted the supply chain, and this caused a shortage of goods and created an inflationary environment. The raising of rates won't make the pandemic go away. It won't cure COVID-19. The second phase of inflation was caused by the Russians invading the Ukraine. I'm sure that Putin would not put down his arms just because we raised interest rates. Again, counterproductive to raise those rates. Inflation caused by the shortage of oil, gas, commodities, fertilizer, everything as a result of that war will be there, and raising rates won't make those costs go down. And of course, the third wave was the closing down of China because of their pandemic. They have a zero tolerance now for COVID-19. As that continues, the supply chain will even be more interrupted. Raising interest rates won't cure the Chinese decision to close down their economy. So I think you have to look elsewhere in terms of fighting inflation.
So what is the thinking behind raising interest rates to curb inflation?
Try think of banging a nail into the wall. You can use a sledgehammer and you destroy the wall as well as accomplishing your goal of getting the nail banged into the wall, but you could do it with a hammer as well. You don't need a big sledgehammer. The idea of raising interest rates to the point where you absolutely destroy the economy, you accomplish your goal. You have tamed inflation. There's no inflation, there's no economy, there's nothing. And what's happened is in the past, if you look at Paul Volcker, who did a great job taming inflation, but he must have raised interest rates 10, 12, 15 times during his tenure until it finally reached about 20% and the economy collapsed. And he's heralded with taming inflation, which is true. But the question is, was it necessary to destroy the economy and all the jobs and the people and the companies for all those years instead of doing it a different way?
Does the central bank have the ability to implement a more targeted strategic approach to curbing inflation than just raising the interest rates across the board?
Well, that's probably one of the few tools they have. But as Bernanke said in a recent interview, and I can read it directly, it says, unfortunately, the Fed can do little about these supply chain problems. That was his last line in an interview. And I think everybody realizes that in practicality. It seems as if everybody's jumping on a bandwagon. We've got to raise rates 3/4 of a point, and then somebody says, I'll see your 3/4 and I'll raise you 3/4. And before you know it, everything is coming undone. And apartment buildings that are having their mortgages rolled over, all of a sudden, some landlord who had nothing to do with causing inflation is faced with a higher rate. And his only solution is to raise his rentals, which in effect causes inflation. So the answer to your question is the central banks have very little to do in terms of controlling inflation.
Would it then, to take a more targeted approach, does the IRS have capabilities of?
Well, the IRS is a very powerful institution, as we all know. And just to look back at how the IRS has stimulated the economy in the past, they've offered things such as investment tax credit, accelerated depreciation, all levers that help you invest in a project that makes it worthwhile for an investor group to put up the funds, and they get a good return because they're getting some benefits down the line, either through tax credits or accelerated depreciation. So perhaps the answer is to take away some of these benefits to slow down inflation, slow down the stimulus, take the stimulus away by reducing or eliminating investment tax credit completely, taking depreciation and saying, for the next 5 years, you can't use depreciation as a shelter on any new projects.
Can you explain depreciation?
So if you have income of, let's say, $1 million, and your depreciation is $600,000 because you put some project in the ground, you were building it, and you were able to depreciate it over a period of time, they shorten the time and they say you can depreciate it over 5 years instead of 10 years. Now you can take, let's say, $600,000 as depreciation. Well, if you're in the 50% tax bracket, which most investors are today, you save half of that. That's a real benefit. So if you take that away, the investors will probably say, maybe I won't do that project because it doesn't make sense when I run the numbers. And to the extent that there are investment tax credits available, you take that away because now they don't get that immediate tax benefit. So that's one way that the IRS can lend a hand, but only on new projects. Leave the other projects alone. Don't destroy the rest of the economy just because you want to control inflation. Put the onus on those that are causing inflation, not the ones that had nothing to do with it. They're just working through their project as they were the last 4 or 5 years.
And so there's a construction crew that would have had work if they had built it, who now don't. That is a significantly smaller proportion of the
Correct.
population.
2-3 years ago, before the pandemic, everybody was running around trying to figure out how can we get some more inflation into the system, and rates were low. So you had low rates, low inflation before the pandemic came, the shutdown in China came, the war in the Ukraine came, before those things hit, which proves that it wasn't interest rates that are causing inflation. It's these outside elements. You can stop the inflationary runaway by stopping the construction of brand new projects and things of that nature that cause the shortages in supply.
And is this something that the Biden administration could sit down with the IRS, sit down with the central bank, and work out a plan to take this more targeted approach?
I think the first step is working together, everybody working together. I mean, it is the government, and there's the Fed, there's the IRS, there's the whole banking industry. We were talking earlier about where all the funds from this stimulus package from the pandemic went. Well, it's very simple. It went to the banks. The banks have a tremendous amount of capital right now. Normally, when you raise rates, your cost of funds also goes up. But in this case, it's not happening. The banks don't have to borrow anymore. They just have to sit there and allow their rates to go up as a result of the Fed raising rates. So the banking industry will get a lot stronger. The rest of the economy will get a lot weaker until such time as people begin not being able to meet their payments. And combination of bankruptcies, combination of closing down businesses, things of that nature will bring us into a recession. So if we continue on the way that we are now, we're definitely going to have a recession, a serious one. And it's not going to last 6 months or a year. It'll last many years. That's why I say we've got to try our best to come up with solutions now rather than just arbitrarily raising interest rates. One Fed governor will say he wants this, another one says, well, I think I'll do 25 basis points higher than that, because it's a safe place for them to be, just to sit there and raise rates. But it's not a safe place for the American economy.
The last time we went into a recession because of interest rate hikes, how long did it take for us to get out of it?
Very close to a decade. Certain lives were permanently damaged. Somebody that went out of business and went bankrupt, he didn't recover.
You laid out 3 primary events that have led to this situation we're in. Does the Biden and or the Trump administration, outside of these 3 events, have any blame for?
I don't believe it's a Biden issue. I don't believe it's a political issue. These events take place once in a decade or a lifetime, but it seems like every year some event takes place. It's a matter of dealing with the problem, not trying to figure out who to blame for the problem, because that's not going to get you anywhere. It's finding solutions to the problems, to moderate it. I was in the shipping industry. We had a situation where there were thousands of dock workers working as longshoremen and stevedores when the container industry began, and containers replaced workers. But by being smart and using common sense, we didn't lay off all the dock workers. We allowed, through attrition, for their jobs to run off, as long as they didn't add new jobs. That was the whole key. It was kind of what we call a soft landing. You did it through attrition. You didn't automatically change and say it has to be done tomorrow. The same thing here. You have to slowly address the problem and not do these quick turnarounds and quick price increases. And you see food prices have gone up a tremendous amount, and slowly but surely this will eat into the economy.
So in terms of gas prices, which I think is right up there with food on everyone's mind as they look to buy a steak that now costs $35 in the supermarket, we're above $5 in many states for a gallon of gas. The Biden administration has floated the idea of getting rid of the federal gas tax, which, as I understand it, does not really amount to a significant decrease. Is there anything to be done about these gas prices?
Yes, dropping the tax a little bit will help. Releasing the strategic petroleum reserve helps a little bit, but these are not game changers. You're talking about multi-billion-dollar issues, and you can't have a situation where you're telling the oil companies, we're going to beat you up if you don't stop producing oil, and then calling out the oil companies and saying, you've got to start digging right now. You can't turn it around like that. You need a plan. You need intelligent people sitting down together and saying, okay, we understand that we can't continue to pollute the atmosphere, but let's do it in a slower fashion. Let's allow some construction. Let's allow some building and digging of oil wells so we can produce more oil.
If we were to have the ear of the Biden administration right now, what would you suggest to them?
Well, I would remove immediately any benefits for building and constructing. I would eliminate any accelerated depreciation. Not for everybody. I'm saying for new building, new construction, eliminate that. Also, instead of investment tax credit, reverse engineer it. Let's call it an investment tax debit. So you tell somebody, instead of giving you 15% of your project and issue you a credit, we're going to charge you 15% if you start that project. That acts as a real damper on any logical investor. He won't build and he won't create inflation. He won't buy more lumber. He won't buy more nails and sheetrock, concrete. And that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to dampen that end of the market without destroying the existing system.
Is this limited to the construction realm, or are you using that as one example?
I'm using that as a proxy.
So
People build rail cars, they build all kinds of things that add to the inflationary equation. You need steel to build rail cars, you need coal to make the steel to build rail cars. But if you take away those incentives, that's how you bank the flames of inflation. That's how you tame it.
And that is only affecting new projects. That's only affecting new companies.
Right.
And if it's a Silicon Valley startup, they're going to have a much harder time getting their investment from that angel investor to go.
Well, it depends. It depends. If they're building something, if they're constructing something in this country, the answer is probably yes. But I'm not addressing the startups at this point. I'm addressing the things that really cause inflation.
And will that also have a positive effect on food prices and things like that? I mean, I understand how the price of a nail goes down, how the price of sheetrock goes down with this. Would it bring prices down across the board?
You have to address every problem as if it's a problem on its own. If you're talking about food prices, that has to do with the war in the Ukraine, because you have things like fertilizer, things like other commodities that can't be shipped out of the ports because the ports are blocked. The point is, raising the interest rate will not solve that problem. You need another solution to that problem, whether it's growing more food in countries that can grow more food. That's another issue. But you shouldn't use raising interest rates as ammunition towards eliminating the fact that you can't sail a vessel out of Odessa with grain to feed the people. That's not going to do it.
Out of the three major problems that we're facing right now, which in your opinion is the worst and needs to be corrected?
I look at it, which is the easiest that will eventually correct, and that is probably the so-called supply chain tangle. I think the shipping companies, particularly the container shippers moving cargo from China to America and other countries, that will eventually be sorted out because they are building more containers, more ships are coming online. That will be taken care of. The infrastructure in the United States with all the railroads and the rail cars, that's being sorted out. It takes some time, but that stress will go away from the inflationary market, that supply chain issue. The second one that I think will probably happen will be China. I think they will eventually allow their citizens to go to work and produce and export product, which will take pressure off of the price of that product. The last one is the war in the Ukraine. That's going to be a longer process, not only for how long it lasts, but the aftermath of that war. How do people engage after such a situation has taken place? I have no comment on at this point. But again, raising interest rates will not end that war.
This has ever been incredibly informative and fascinating.
Okay.
Thank you so much for taking the time, Marty.
Thank you.